Welcome everybody to the November Spark session. I know it's a different day, and that's because we were at the Collaboratory, which is the topic of today's webinar. Gosh, right when we needed to be broadcasting this. So we decided to do it after the Collaboratory, and then there was this little holiday that happened last week that we thought might get in the way. So today we're going to talk about what happened at the Collaboratory, why we're doing it, like what in the world it has to do with freedom. And today I have Sean Malone, the Director of Media for FEE, and I have John Guido from the Foundation for Harmony and Prosperity, who were both there. They were part of the committee of three that made it happen this time. So there was a lot of work that went in advance, and these guys had to put up with me on the phone about once a week for a while. So with that, I just want to jump into the first question, and we're going to start with John because he kind of sparked this whole Collaboratory concept about 2 years ago. So John, why do you find projects like the Collaboratory really important to furthering freedom?
Yeah, well, I'd like to start by saying you don't have to be a bald guy with a goatee to be part of the Collaboratory. That's just the way me and Sean represent. But about 2 years ago, I started attending an event called the Civic Collaboratory, which was a similar event that the progressives put on, and it moves around the country, and they have a really dynamic and diverse membership in the event. And it's not totally the same as how we run our Collaboratory, but the idea was kind of borrowed from them to bring everyone together that has a common goal or common set of values. In our case is freedom and liberty, and try and leverage each other's resources to build a more robust and dynamic marketplace. So it's not about competition. It's not about stealing donors or audiences. It's more about creating a much more robust industry, if you will, where there's more consumers and there's more consumption and there's just more dynamic products and communities for people to engage with. And so in the first 3 years while I was working on the movement, one of the main conversations everyone was having and complaining about was how we're all so siloed, and we have a lot of duplication and we have a lot of wasted efforts. And so I look at the Collaboratory as both a way to start to reduce some of that, as well as change the mindset. And hopefully the movement starts becoming more like a marketplace where we have division of labor and we have reasons to collaborate and work together just to become more effective and service the audience better. So, and from the first two events that we've had, I would say we're off to a pretty dang good start on that front.
And Sean, you were at the first Collaboratory. You probably were like, hey, why am I coming to this thing? But you were kind enough to be there. You were one of my favorite participants at that first one. You were super active and helpful. And then, of course, very helpful in getting us organized for the second one. So what's your perspective on the same question?
Well, I think one of the things that I really liked about the first session, and some of it just was sort of serendipitous in a way. I just come to FEE to work as Director of Media. I was really actively looking for as many projects as I could find, not only to collaborate with people on, but also to spark ideas of our own, right? But one of the things John just said, actually, I think is really, really valuable in this, which is division of labor a little bit more than, like, because of a lot of the silos, my experience over the years has been that you talk to somebody after several months of working on a project and suddenly you find that they're kind of doing the same thing, or they're doing some variant of it that's basically the same. You're kind of working across purposes. Sometimes you're doing things that are like, that you should partner on, that would make total sense for you both to bring some aspect to the table, and nobody knows what anybody's doing, you know? And when I used to live in DC, it was easier because some of the other people at different organizations that we'd work with, you know, like I would go have lunch with those people. Like I go talk to people at Reason or Cato or wherever, and we'd have conversations. But there was never anything that was very useful in terms of not only bringing people together, so we all kind of were on the same page, but also, you know, especially this time, I think we did a really interesting good, I think, a pretty good job of providing an opportunity to actually get genuine feedback. And honestly, some of the projects that we talked about this week or this session were probably radically changed from their initial pitch. And I think that that's a really good thing. I think that's something that we can do with the Collaboratory that it really doesn't exist outside of it.
Wow, it's always fun to hear other people's perspectives. I agree with you. I'll answer the same question. When John said, hey, does Spark Freedom want to help get this Collaboratory concept going, I thought, yeah, that's what's missing. We don't have a good way to be honest with each other because we're worried about donor competition. We're worried about our reputations sometimes, and having a place where you can go and put your idea out there that your team's worked really hard on, and then, get some critical feedback from people outside your organization who aren't trying to please you because you're the president, who aren't trying to not hurt your feelings because they don't want you to quit tomorrow, and who are maybe seeing things from a totally different experiential perspective. They're thinking about it from an angle maybe I wouldn't ever think of because I don't exist in their world, as well as bringing people from outside the freedom movement who are freedom oriented and successful in the private sector. It's a huge boost, and being able to help other people have that boost and maybe get beyond looking at freedom in sort of our geeky way, which is good. I mean, those discussions are good, but we kind of need to make freedom cool too, right? And for some reason, I see freedom being reframed as the opposite of freedom. It's total control with the illusion of freedom. If we can push back on that reframe, I think projects like this really help do that. So it was a no-brainer when John brought it up, and then after the first one, it was exciting to do another one. And we might talk about where the next one's going later in the session. I don't want to foreshadow that one yet. Okay, so Sean, which one or two of the projects that you saw? Because the first Collaboratory, I think we did 3 or 4 projects. This one we did, 6, 8, something like that. We did a lot. It was a long day. Huh?
I think it was like 8 or 9 actually, but yeah.
So which two surprised you the most for maybe an approach or something you weren't expecting to see, and why?
Well, I don't know if there was anything that I would say like I wasn't totally expecting to see. Of course, we got to actually review some of these, before before the event. So like I had kind of an in, so it's not quite fair. There were some, I will say, on both sides, some that I thought were really smart, and some that I thought and was glad to see probably made some big changes. For example, I thought, as an example of maybe both simultaneously, actually, I thought it was pretty much the last one that we saw, the Souvlaki project from Greek Liberty Monitor. They basically their issue is that they have a VAT, a value-added tax on food in Greece, and they wanted to draw some attention to that, and draw some attention to a policy change that they'd like to see reduce that VAT, or ideally eliminate it, but it's Greece, so maybe not, right? But the initial pitch was actually very academic. Like they were talking about white papers, and they were talking about, basically just doing a report and then trying to package that report in a nice way. And then after the conversation, I think it really got radically overhauled to be about doing something creative and active. And one of the ideas was to actually print up wrappers for souvlakis, for various souvlaki vendors, and like put information on the wrappers so that as people were eating, they'd have this experience. Stuff like that, I think, makes the Collaboratory a really valuable experience. On the flip side, SFL, the Students for Liberty, had this idea to do a Facebook Live recurring weekly video series. And I think we kind of talked them out of it to some extent for what I actually think are pretty good reasons. I think there was a lot there that they were maybe ambitious about, but which they probably weren't going to be able to commit enough to actually do at the level that they wanted to do it. And also, there's stuff like that already exists, you know, so not having that overlap. And even in my own case, I think there was a lot of useful feedback. And we talked about this a little bit. I know you have a question kind of lined up later, but like, there's a lot that we had talked about it's not been like a radical overhaul for what we're trying to do, but it was very constructive and very helpful. So I think all those things are interesting. The other thing I wanted to mention is and granted, I'm a little biased because it's a buddy of mine, but the Free Kekistan documentary, I thought was interesting because one, it was a little polarizing in the room. Some people really kind of got it, and some people really kind of didn't get what they were trying to do with it, and so that's an interesting facet already. But also, what I liked about it and why I wanted to see that get presented in the first place was because it's something that I don't think anybody in our sphere has ever done, which is to really do something that's flat out about pop culture, about YouTube, about influencers outside of the Liberty sphere. And I was really glad that we were able to bring that in. I guess I would also say I found a great deal of value with a couple of the data presenters from the World's Smallest Political Quiz and from my side with and stuff. But honestly, so many of them had such interesting takes, and they were different enough takes that I think everybody, you know, I at least got a lot out of listening to a lot of the presenters.
Yeah, you know, the funny thing about I Side With is that they didn't have a project for acceleration, but they presented something that, something people might not know is because I have some understanding of technology, often donors with whom I'm friends will send me draft proposals that they've gotten. And I have seen what those guys have monetized, proposed to foundations at the levels of, you know, $500,000, $1.5 million many times in the last 8 years or so. And these guys did it without any donor funds, and they monetized it, and then they're reselling it to us at a rate that's amazingly low. So I was kind of excited when I saw their whole project presentation. I mean, not that we do a lot of that at the Collaboratory, but I thought that's something everybody in the room can use, and at a very, an extremely reasonable fee. So that one was great. And then the Free Kekistan thing was, I think that was completely out of left field for a couple of reasons. One being the pop culture, but also nobody knew who that person was. It wasn't like, oh, this is an old friend from this organization pitching, you know, it was like, who's this guy? Wait, he doesn't talk like us. He didn't have to be shot with the Nerf gun for saying laugh or curve, right? Right, okay. So John, or is it me next? No, it's John.
Yeah.
John Guido. Okay, as the project acceleration began, which is a big part of what we do at the Collaboratory, did you see some trends in the questions that came up repeatedly? Like, what sorts of things did you see participants asking? Did it surprise you? What was your thought about that?
I thought it was interesting. A lot of people kind of face this wall of so what, or why, or what's the impact, or what's the purpose, and there wasn't a lot of quick, clear answers. I thought that was pretty interesting. That when you put 30 brains in a room that are not in that, don't have like that tunnel vision on the project, and they just have a real 30,000 foot viewpoint, and they're just saying, well, what's the impact of this when this does work, or you know, if you execute it well, and a lot of that wasn't thought out. So I thought that was great to kind of push back on people, even from a more macro perspective, not just on the finite details.
Yeah, I thought so too. You know, the other one a lot of people asked was they pushed back on target audience.
Yeah.
You saw a lot of like, who are you trying to why are you trying, how are you? So
just like the term millennials. Like,
that made my Spark Freedom heart happy. Yeah, oh yeah, millennials.
Yeah.
I used that term in a letter yesterday, but don't kill me. So the next question is for me. So I'm interviewing myself. That's a little weird. But anyway, it's we had a moonshine tour the day before the event started. And I think a question that came up from some participants is like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing something so casual? Aren't you worried the donors are going to think you're wasting their money? And the reason we did the Moonshine Tour was because we're trying to establish rapport in the group so that when you're standing up later getting critiqued, which you will get some critique on your project, no matter how awesome it is, you're less defensive, but also because what we saw come out of the first Collaboratory were some pretty strong relationships, and people said they really wanted to spend more time just talking to other creatives in the movement, other people who see a problem with how we're communicating freedom, other people who want to lap our opponents, basically, in the realm of how we're communicating freedom, how we're changing or impacting culture. And the best way to do that, I thought, was to go on an adventure together. It was too cold to kayak, and moonshine's always fun, you know, that sort of loosens the tongue a little bit. So with Tennessee being a moonshining state, historically, we thought that would be a fun thing. And you know, it didn't waste donor funds. People paid for their tickets. So, you know, it was great. It was a great little adventure, I thought, even though we may have had some car sick people on all the windy roads. I don't know. That was the Moonshine Tour. Okay, Sean. So you were in the unique position of having been both an organizer and a presenter.
Yep.
So how did it feel when you were standing up in front of this room of 30-something people being accelerated? Did it feel a little strange? How was it for you?
No, I mean, honestly, it's great for me. Like this kind of stuff is I probably told some people there and some people who, I don't know who's watching, but if anybody knows me at all, like, I mean, I went to music school, right? Like I have an arts background. All of what I've done for most of my in fact, literally my entire career, I've never done anything else since I was about 20, but, you know, music or video production, that kind of stuff. Getting critiqued is like the easiest thing in the world for me because it's normal. It's constant all the time kind of stuff. What was different about it, I think, was that, well, it was just a lot to do to prep a presentation and also to get everything else done and ready and all that kind of stuff. But also what was interesting was the diversity of voices in the room, the diversity of interests in the room. Like they were giving critiques that weren't just about the creative work. Like they're critiquing the overall concept of what we're doing, which is great, actually. It's really valuable, I thought. But I had a great time. I didn't have anything negative to say about any of that. I thought that we were, you know, a lot of people participated. A lot of people had a lot of valuable things to say. And honestly, I mean, they take a lot of what some of the people said to pretty serious heart with what we're doing.
Did you get any good commitments that have you excited? Yeah.
I mean, certainly the biggest one probably is to do more, because I came in looking for a couple of things, but specifically looking for content development help because I'm wildly past my capacity at this point. And one of the biggest commitments was from Patrick Reason over at Taliesin Nexus to go out there and pitch some of the kinds of content that we've already been making to the people that are going through his programs, and then be able to see which of those people have ideas that are sort of in line with our vision, which has been a challenge, right? One of the biggest challenges that I've had and that I brought into the presentation was that I can find people who are really into the ideas or people who are like pretty good creatively, but it's really hard to find the mesh between the two. And even then, once you find that, you got to find somebody who understands Fee's vision and what we're trying. That's a challenge. So what Patrick offered, I thought was really great. And a similar offer has kind of been made from MPI, and we're kind of working out some other things. So that was super helpful. And then at the same time, there was also some really good advice on running specific actionable tests and doing smaller scale market testing, which is part of what we're trying to do as well. So yeah, I think there was tons of stuff that was really valuable.
Yeah, something that kind of impressed me on yours is there was a breadth of people who could help you in the room. And when you put this grid up of this is all the kinds of content we want, these are the ones we're doing, and there's all these empty blocks, and they started like trying to plug the blocks in. The room was funny to watch that happen. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that also goes to what I was saying about the nice thing about the idea of the collaboratory is that, like, I can make so much, myself, but if other people are already doing something that fits into a category that I don't have to make myself,
Yeah.
that's even better. But I have to know about it, right? Like, I have to be in a room with other people saying, hey, we're doing this, and that's what this is good for.
Yeah. Did you pick up a podcaster?
Oh, maybe. Not yet. It's not nothing's confirmed yet. But yeah.
That would be good. I'm hoping you do. Okay, John, speaking of commitments, can you tell us what I mean when I'm talking? I almost got ahead of the game there, right? So what are commitments, and why are they one of the most important pieces of the experience? Because I think that's how I see this different than other collaborative meetings.
Yeah. That was one of the biggest takeaways from the Civic Collaboratory I was participating in, is that they would publicly make commitments, the lean-ins, and they would publicly record these. And it was a really great tool for accountability. And, people were more sincere about what they commit to. And then there's, typically a lot better follow-up. And it gives it takes a little pressure off the presenter to be bugging people to get these commitments done, because it's more of a peer-reviewed process. And what I saw on the left was pretty amazing, the way people were following up on commitments, and they would come back and report on these new partnerships and collaborations and how they were just kind of amplifying all their work. And I don't know, it seemed like it would be a really good mechanism to use in our event. And it's kind of the same thing when you go to a meeting, even within your organization. Everyone agrees to all kinds of stuff, but if it doesn't get written down, ideally with timelines of when people will do these commitments, they usually tend not to happen. So we're just kind of using that model.
Yeah, I think my favorite commitment from the first one was the free the people fee.
Yeah.
Closer working together on content thing that happened.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is we did the event, we sent out the list of what everybody agreed to, didn't speak to anybody again for 6 months. And I called Sean to see, hey, how's that going for you? And he's like, it's been the best thing ever with this new, collaboration I have. So I thought, well, that's good. I didn't have to remind people. And I think you're right. That public reinforcement is really helpful. Okay, so guys, we're about to go into the Q&A section. There's one more question I want one of you to ask me, because I think it's the most important question of this whole segment. But just a reminder, if you want to ask questions, I see one in the comments, Patrick, which I will bring up. But also there's a Q&A button. I think it's at the top of your screen. If you put it in there, it's a little easier for me to proctor it. But Patrick, I'll read your comment and we can respond to it. But somebody ask me. Do you know what to ask me about the Collaboratory? No? There's another one coming up.
Okay. You got it, Sean?
Well, no, what are you going to say? Sorry.
Do you want to, well, Nicole, this is the second Collaboratory that Spark Freedom has hosted. How do you feel it was different from the first one, and where do you see it moving in the future?
Okay, so the second part of that is what I'm really excited to talk about, where I see it going in the future. The way this one was different, I think, though, first of all, was that the first one, we had a lot of kind of geeky marketing presentations, and we got rid of all of those. And then
feedback, right?
Yeah, because of feedback. And we tried to have more open time, but then we ended up plugging in the open time with that I Side With presentation, which was really exciting for people. And it was just a quick product demo. It took about 20 minutes. But there was a lot more, I think, chance for people to interact. And then we tried to remind people to have fun by, shooting wonky talkers with Nerf guns if they went off the deep end too much, or sharing personal things around dinner. So I think it was a little bit, for me, it was more fun than the first one. It may have just been because the first time you ever do an event, you're a little nerve-wracked about how's this going to go. It seemed more open, and having more projects, I think, was really good. But the next Collaboratory, super excited. We're going to Hollywood. Actually, we're going to LA. But yeah, we found a great place to be in LA. Taliesin Nexus is going to host at their offices. And Taliesin, sorry, did I say Taliesin? I do that sometimes. So we're going to California. We're going to California in March, and that's a great time to be in Southern California. So, you know, start thinking about if you want to sign up for the Collaboratory in LA. What that opens up for us is a tighter overlap with some very awesome creatives that are from Hollywood, right? So we've been able to attract some people to travel across the country to, you know, first Austin, then Nashville. This opens up, you know, potentially some new ideas where we have Hollywood producers, maybe, I can't promise, but maybe something like that, critiquing creative ideas. And that sort of thing can really accelerate concepts from, you know, good to great, right? So I'm super excited about that. When we started kicking that idea around and then it all came together in like 37 minutes, I was stoked. So that's where we're going next. Okay, so now I'm gonna open it up for Q&A. We're gonna start with Patrick. I'd
like to address that one. I think it's a great question.
Yeah, let me read it out so people.
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
So it says, I don't know if the movement is at the point where we should be worried about efficiency over creativity. We lack way more creativity than we do efficiency, and creativity in the movement is mostly a spectrum of vanilla, no real flavor. So John's, you go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I would argue that I don't think we are efficient or creative at the level we need to be. And I don't think that's one over the other. For instance, the sharing of content, kind of the identifying who is more distributor, who is more content producer, and just sorting through those simple things creates a very efficient way for us to get better more creative content out to more people. And that's kind of where the Collaboratory is at. We weren't prioritizing one over the other. It's I think it's a very symbiotic relationship. And also what we're seeing is a lot of shops are trying to be creatives when they really don't have the talent or the resources. They have the desire and the passion, but that doesn't always convert into awesome content that the marketplace wants to digest.
Yep. Sean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, I completely agree with John. Like, I don't think as a movement as a whole, like we're anywhere near being effective on the creative or the execution side, right? Like, I think that there's so much less that's being done today than could be done or should be done, and we're so far behind that, like, I think both of these things need to be pushed to their absolute limits. And there's also a feedback from one to the other. Like, one of the things that's great about even just sitting in a room with other people and kicking around ideas is that your ideas do get more creative, but you also get more efficient because you find out, oh, that person has a comparative advantage to do this, I should let them do that. Or you find out that, like, you know, like I said with SFL, maybe the thing you were thinking you were going to do that was a good idea has been explored before by other people, and that there are lessons you could learn from that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, I think all that stuff is really important. That said, to the actual question of how we boost more creativity, I think the more we do this kind of thing, assuming it continues and expands and everything else, is to bring in more outside voices, more people who are experts in that area, right? Some people who have demonstrated experience, you know, on YouTube, on Instagram, wherever, right? Like in film and television, right? Like bringing those people in and saying, hey, you know, here's a pitch. What would you say to somebody who pitched that to you at, you know, Defy Media or, you know, Complex or whatever, like that kind of stuff, you know? And I think we can do that.
Yeah, especially if we go to LA in March, right?
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how we do have a lot of passion, I think, for creativity. And our movement's a lot more creative than it was 10 years ago. I you know,
yeah.
I remember the first hostage video I saw with the talking head, and it was like a white background and a policy guy talking about policy. And the reason I call it the hostage video is the communications director who made it put it up. He was super excited. He'd gotten his first video out for the organization ever. And a donor calls him and says, "Why is there a hostage video on your website?" And that guy, I mean, since that moment, he's gotten much better at video, and he figured out he's not in the movement anymore, or maybe he's back, but he left the movement to do some other things. But I think that was an eye-opening moment for him, because that was when he realized we had to go beyond the mechanics of I can make the computer do the thing to, oh, the content better be good too. And maybe a guy standing in the hallway with fluorescent lighting on his pale looking face in the middle of winter in a northern state. I won't say which one it is. If people who have been in the movement a long time are communications director, they totally know who this is when I said hostage video. But yeah, so like moving beyond that to, I mean, some of the work Fee is doing has definitely broken through the hostage video mold and Free the People. And there's lots of fun things that are happening, and taking it beyond that. I think it requires letting go of our worry about reputation. And sometimes that's not possible for an organization. So sometimes you can share the idea with a creative, and then they can take it with their brand, and your brand isn't hurt, and you've just helped inform it. And that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that gets to a thing that I've been trying to explore a lot more at Fee. And it is, I will say, it's not actually that easy to do, but exploring, this is going to be a little self-serving given the meeting that we're literally having right now, but collaborations with other people, right? Like, but not just other people in our network, but people far outside. Like, you know, one of the first things I did at Fee was to sponsor a couple episodes of Mike Rowe's podcast, right? And it immediately exposed Fee to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and then ultimately millions, because he added a Facebook video for one of those. So ultimately millions of people, most of them probably had never heard of Fee before. And over the course of a couple months, we generated like an additional like 12,000 emails to our daily list. We got about 18,000 emails total, stuff like that. That really actually provided a huge boost last year. And that's the kind of thing that we can be doing all the time. Another thing just happened to me a couple weeks ago, where a guy emailed me, said he had a blog, like a wrestling blog, and wanted to share one of the videos, one of the keynote speeches from FeeCon this year, which is with Kane, the professional wrestler. And of course, I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever, you know, share away, right? It's a blog, go for it. He did that. That YouTube video now has 360,000 views, pretty much entirely it's a 20-minute video of a keynote speech, and it's pretty much entirely off the back of this one blogger. Like, we need to be way more proactive about that kind of stuff, right? Like, I could have been the one who went out to him and said, hey, I see you've got a kick-ass wrestling blog. I got this great video of this guy. Maybe you want to share it with your friends. I didn't do that, you know? And like, it's those kinds of things where you just think there are other ways to reach people, and we're not even trying on some of those ways, you know? And honestly, I think it's the new normal, and we need to adopt that.
Yeah. Yeah. John, anything to add, or shall I ask the next question?
Just to play on that, I think it's great that we are creating something that's bigger than, you know, the traditional movement and the traditional events, which I can kind of right now predict what's going to happen at all the events next in 2018, and the content and the speakers and all that stuff. Whereas we're bringing in people that don't even know there is a movement, don't care. They're just relevant in their communities and circles of whatever influence they have. They believe in the same values we have. That's kind of our only filter. It's you know, the freedom values, or, you know, we loosely define that, but we have the same goals in mind, and we're bringing in, we're building a bigger community of diverse people that are in all kinds of different pockets of communication and culture. And it's really exciting to me to see that happen organically. And we've had, I think, maybe 15% of the participants, maybe 20 each event, have been outside of the movement, where people don't even know who they are. So that's just, I mean, that's to me one of the best things we have going for us.
Yeah, we had a guy there this time who I added at the last minute because I was talking to him, and he was talking about how he doesn't know you know, exactly which organizations to support and that sort of thing. And he's a creative talent in his own right. And I was like, well, come to this really strange meeting that I can't explain to you exactly how it works. You just have to go. And I found when he didn't talk much at first, but when he started talking, I was like, yep, that's what people need to hear. Cause he's like, yeah, I don't know what that is, but this. And sometimes I think we get so used to talking to ourselves, we don't realize that we don't make sense to other people in some cases. So, okay, I have the next question I have this in like online and from several places. What do project leaders get from this process, and what kind of project is appropriate for presentation at the Collaboratory?
Sean, you want to take the first half of that and I'll do the second?
Yeah. Hang on a second. Sorry. All right. Wait, sorry. Nicole, say that one more time. You cut out for a second there. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, he said, so the first part is what do project leaders get from the Collaboratory? And then that's for you. The second part is what kind of projects are appropriate?
Okay. Yeah. So what people get, first and foremost, is feedback. And it's ideally, and really, I think it certainly was this year. I mean, a lot of invaluable feedback, all the stuff that we've been talking about from a diverse range of people who have really different experiences. And the more this expands, the more that's going to be true. That seems like something you could get anywhere, but it's just not. Like the way that you get feedback when you actually sit in a room with other creative people and have a conversation in person is so dramatically different from the kind of feedback you get if you just send out a PDF or a video and something and email some people and say, hey, what do you think, right? You'll never get the kind of feedback that you can get just by bringing people together for a day. So that's the core thing for me that I think is super valuable. And then as a bonus, you get to walk away with ideally a bunch of partnerships with other people who can actually help you execute. And so, and especially once you've gone through some of the feedback process and then got to thinking about the way you might change your idea or expand on your idea or any of those kinds of things, it becomes really apparent which people in the room can offer what kinds of support. And honestly, as somebody who's tried to support a lot of other people's stuff at the same time, it's not that big of a burden to do either. Like for the most part, it's just, you know, hey, here's the contact information of this guy that I met that can help you with marketing, or here is, you know, access to we'll cross-post our stuff on Facebook. So when you make that video, we'll share it with our people. It's actually a really easy way to bring a lot of people together and then to get on the same page. And I think that's hugely beneficial, especially for where we're at as a movement in general.
Yep. Okay, John, now it's your turn. And what you're talking about is what kind of projects are appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's easier to define what type of projects aren't a good fit, or at least start there. And for me, from what I've seen, you know, anything really wonky, anything centered around white papers or really data-driven, they're just not going to be exciting for the group. They're not going to get much of a benefit, a lift. I think if your project is really handcuffed by your organization or your donor base or something like that, and it's really, we got to do it this way anyways, regardless of how many better ideas come in or more creative or whatever partnerships we can arrange, well, that's not going to be a good fit either, because there's no way to collaborate. If it's a project that's not well thought out and has no chance of being funded, and you're just looking for all the pieces, that's not really fair to bring into the Collaboratory either. I think you need to have one leg of the stool that's really solid, like a really amazing idea. And, you know, there's the other components. You need resources, you need partners. You got to have something to start with, not just a whiteboard great concept. Although we want to get into that space in the future, doing an incubator, but that's not for the Collaboratory yet. So I think it's neat to see far out there projects come in, especially from people that aren't from the traditional nuts and bolts nonprofits or think tanks, because it's really neat to see how they're thinking, and you can learn a lot about doing things with less resources and doing things in different marketplaces that we're not aware of. And so I really enjoy those kind of projects, and I think we see great collaboration on that.
Yeah, I would agree. It's fun to watch the interplay between the tank and the not tank projects. Something else that struck me about the projects is they kind of fell into two buckets this year, where some were halfway down the road they were going down, and others were like, we have this idea. And so the kind of feedback you got for one versus the other was very different. And we may be a little more clear about the status of each project next year, so people know going in, this is still very conceptual and we just have funding or whatever. And these, like, we're already halfway through our data gathering on the data gathering project for market research, for example, Sean. You're a good way down the road on your project, right?
Yeah.
But I think both kinds of projects get a good boost, as long as they have, as you said, John, one leg of the stool. Okay, so we only have time for one more question, and I have two here. So the one I'm going to ask is, what was the biggest takeaway for each of you from the experience of the Collaboratory? And because that question is kind of a big question, I'm going to start with Sean, so he has like 30 seconds to madly think of something while I'm talking to people. So what was the biggest takeaway for you from the experience?
Man, honestly, the biggest takeaway for me was to think about, this is going to sound a little boring, but honestly, to think about the way that I am testing certain ideas, and think about like the opportunities I can get to be better at delegating certain things. I don't know how to explain this very, very succinctly, but basically, like, the issue that I've had, one of the issues that I've had is that, like, we want to run a bunch of experiments, but the experiments need to be better designed, and they need to have somebody who is not just me, because again, way over capacity, who can actually execute the control and the tests and all of those other things in sort of similar aesthetic, so that, we get good results. And that's been really tricky. And I think some of the things that people were saying about how to do that sparked some other ideas for me that I think are going to make it a little bit more possible, that we can run the experimental side of what we're trying to do a little bit better, which I like. Yeah. It's a little more boring than like, oh, I have a new video that I'm going to make. I always have new videos I'm going to make. So whatever.
Yeah, but you know what? The testing and learning from the testing piece of communication in the movement is not nailed down yet. It's not even close. No. So that's a great takeaway. I'm glad that's your takeaway. Okay, John, how about you?
Yeah, I would say in 3 words, practical versus intellectual. I just really enjoy the break from the intellectual kind of bombardment that we experience working in this movement, and just being with a bunch of practitioners, like figuring out, let's roll up our sleeves, let's get in the trenches, let's make this happen. What can we do? And I love that space. So for me, it was like, I was like a pig in mud, just rolling around, having a great day. And I do also think what you guys talked about at the tail end there is something that will be probably one of the most important elements, is this: how do we create these minimally viable products and do the quickest iterations in the marketplace to start learning more about what will work and our audiences and all this stuff. And I started to see that bubble up a couple weeks ago at the event. It was beautiful. I mean, I think it's gonna be a really powerful thing that we can help grow.
Yeah.
My biggest takeaway was that people still are not taking time when they come up with projects to think about, so what, in a clear way. There were probably 6 out of 8 projects I wanted to say, would you like to do a day of strategic planning? To get it all on one piece of paper, so it's clear, where we talk about why, who, how you're measuring, like, basic success, because it seemed like some of the ideas were motivated by, we need to have an idea about this tool, rather than we want this result. not all of them, but you know, that came up repeatedly. And sometimes when we asked the question, they had, as it turned out, they had thought that through. They just didn't present it to the room. So I was, but maybe that's my strategic planning colored glasses, that I'm always like, where is your strategic plan? So, you know, I'm almost tempted to offer a pre-session next time for the people who want to just answer the 6 questions I'm going to ask every time. So I don't know. Well, so that's it for this month's Spark session. Next month, we will not be having one. We're taking December off to be with our families for Christmas. So we'll be back in January with, I'm not sure what the topic's going to be yet. We'll send some email about that. But John, Sean, anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I mean, I'm just really looking forward to you know, getting an opportunity to do this again with more people. I think really different people, more ideas. The more we can do this kind of stuff, the more excited I'm going to be.
Yep.
Yeah, and well, I guess I will add one thing. I can't wait to get more of our members active in kind of helping design the formats and being more involved in the DNA of this thing as it grows. And that's how we've designed it, and I love it. It's like Spark Freedom's, you know, the kind of the home, and we have people that help facilitate and sponsor and host, but it's really this organic thing that I think could grow in ways that will surprise us.
Yep, we definitely base what's happening next on those feedback forms and private hallway conversations that happen. So I do want to thank you both for being on both the coordinating committee and helping us get enough sponsorship to make this happen. Fee took a risk on us, and I appreciate that. And John, of course, you've been helpful to the Collaboratory the whole time, so thanks for that. And looking forward to seeing you both in LA.
Absolutely.
Yeah.